When it comes to GPUs, it's very rare that we see brands shaking things up a little, as it's a lot easier and cheaper to just bolt an existing cooler onto each model of card and bring it to market. And while that helps to keep costs down, for us as reviewers, is a bit boring, as it doesn't give us really much to talk about. But luckily today, that's all about to change, with the Inno3D RTX 4070 Twin X2 OC White Stealth. But before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video sponsor.
I'm never going to be an esports gamer. I never get any kills.
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
Is that Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com?
Yes, my son. It is me, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to bestow upon you a gift that will transform you into a true gamer. With a 24.5-inch Full HD screen, 240Hz refresh rate, 0.5 millisecond response time, AMD FreeSync Premium, and height adjustability, you'll be gaming in the big leagues in no time.
Oh, thank you.
No problem, my son. Why don't you check out the link in the description below to find out more.
So as the name suggests, we have an RTX 4070, and it's white, which I'm a big fan of, as a lot of brands have kind of shied away from white GPUs, but they are slowly making a comeback. And Inno3D actually have quite a few models in white, as we saw when we visited them at Computex. But that's not the coolest part of this card. In fact, it's the stealth nature of it, which, while I get, it may be a bit confusing as how can a white card be stealthy, but it actually refers to the way that the power cable is inserted into the card, and more importantly, the location, which we'll get to shortly. In terms of the rest of the card, it's definitely a looker with a two-tone white and silver design and some industrial styling through the way of the 5 Allen screws holding the brushed silver section. Though this is plastic, though due to the brushed look, you wouldn't actually know unless you get up really close. Now the two fans, as the Twin X2 name suggests, are 88mm in size with 11 smooth blades, and are again finished in white with some simple Inno3D branding in the middle of the hub. Other than this, the front is actually very simple and clean looking, and I like that because having a white GPU should be clean and not too in your face, and that's exactly what's been done here. Along the top of the card is some more branding with the GeForce RTX logo, and the shroud wraps around the edge and covers part of the large heatsink, which spans the whole length of the cooler, and also extends beyond the PCB, and from a first glance looks to be split into 3 sections, which are joined by heat pipes. You'll also notice that there's no power connector here, but no, being an RTX 4070, there actually is one, just not where you'd expect it to be. The rear of the card is where things get really interesting in terms of that, as it includes a full metal backplate, which I guess is fairly thick, considering it is an RTX 4070, which isn't the hottest card in terms of temperatures, but it should be enough to keep things under control. But there's plenty of cutouts as well, including one at the rear of the GPU core, as well as towards the end of the card in some unique triangular patterns. But beyond this is another gap, which isn't for assisting cooling, but it's actually for the power connector, which when you look closer, you can actually see includes a single 8-pin PCI Express connector, which is angled down. Now the reasoning behind this is that when you use the included white extension cable and the included PCIe power plate, which is this one here, the connector actually becomes hidden. And I both like it, but I also have gripes too. Firstly, if your GPU is in the vertical position, it's great, as the power cable would be completely hidden and out of sight. Though when you're horizontally mounting it, of which I believe probably most gamers using a card of this size will be doing, I feel it could have been done maybe a little bit better. Now, I'm not an engineer by any means, but having the cable underneath the shroud would have looked a lot cleaner, whether that meant having the cable come out towards the bottom of the card or routed to the side. But I do get that trying to cater for a multitude of cases on the market with different grommet locations and of course motherboard heatsinks could actually be an issue. But it's definitely, I guess what I'd say, a step in the right direction. Now one thing that I do like is that Inno3D have thought about the design as to where the cable actually slots in, next to the rear of the heatsink. They've put a small piece of lightweight plastic to protect the cable from fraying on the sharp metal fins. And while simple, it definitely does the job. Now the card will take up 2 slots inside your case and measures in at 250mm long, 118mm high and 42mm thick, while weighing in at just 962 grams, so should fit most setups quite easily, including smaller form factor builds. Now connection wise, there's 3 DisplayPort connectors and a single HDMI 2.1 port, while the rest of the I/O is taken up by ventilation to help heat exhaust out of the card. Now taking the card apart is pretty simple, with quite a few screws on the backplate, as well as the 4 holding the main part of the cooler onto the PCB. Once you disconnect the power to the fans and pry the cooler off with a little force, the card comes apart to reveal the PCB. Now it is pretty typical for what we'd expect from an NVIDIA RTX 4070, with a small PCB that's reminiscent of a founder's card with its angled shape and well laid out circuitry, with 6 2GB memory ICs around the core. Now the only real standout feature is the single 8-pin power connector, which has been flipped around and positioned within that cutout area of the PCB for the power cable to pass into. And what's most interesting is why INNO3D have gone with an 8-pin and not a 12VH PWR connector, though it's likely due to the strain that the 8-pin can take, as the 12VH PWR can be, let's say, a little more particular with the angle that it has to go in before it causes issues. Though an 8-pin is more than man enough, and INNO3D actually have other RTX 4070s that use the same, an 8-pin connector. The heatsink is much larger than the PCB and is split into 3 sections, with a standalone plate that makes direct contact with the GPU core, while a surrounding plate keeps the memory ICs and corresponding phases under control. The GPU phases are covered by a smaller standalone plate, of which all areas pass heat to the 5 heat pipes that then transfer heat away to the rest of the heatsink. So before we look at cooling, we always want to make sure that the performance is in the margins that we set out, and that the card performs within a range expected by the GPU core. Now to test this, we put it through its paces in 4 games to make sure there were no outliers in terms of performance. Starting with Call of Duty at 1440p, and the stealth card came in at 117 FPS, which puts it ahead of the pack by a single frame per second, so nothing really of significance, but it's good to see the card performing exactly how it should be. Moving on to Cyberpunk, and we saw a respectable 85 FPS, which is above the performance of the Gigabyte Gaming OC card in both the averages and 1% lows, which now also puts it 4 FPS ahead of the Founders Edition RTX 4070 in the averages. But interestingly, it sits 3 frames behind the standard Twin X2, which isn't an OC card, which I guess could be down to the way the OC is affecting the performance or the cable placement, though is more likely just margin of error. Now in Death Stranding, the card came out again on top at 180 FPS, which puts it slightly ahead of all the other cards we tested, though it only equates to around 2%, so again, nothing of significance. Then lastly, in Watch Dogs Legion, again we saw the card coming in the strongest performing at 100 FPS in the averages and 80 FPS in the 1% lows. This does put it ahead, but again only by a single frame per second when compared to the other INNO3D card and Gigabyte card, while the FE trailed a little bit behind that at 97 FPS, though all are within, again, margins that we'd expect. So as you saw, the performance lined up within the realms of where you'd expect an RTX 4070 would, though Cyberpunk did show some anomalies which retesting actually garnered the same results, so could be margin of error, the overclock, silicon lottery, and so much more, though it really is nothing of concern. Now the big area that we do need to focus on is cooling performance, which is where we ran the card for an hour-long loop in F122 to see how things stabilise over a long gaming session. It's here where the GPU temperature sat around 65 degrees throughout our test, with the hotspot peaking to just over 80 degrees, while the memory junction temperature was a little lower at 68 degrees. In terms of the fan speed, this hovered around 1560 RPM, but did peak ever so slightly higher, though not going over 1600 RPM at all during our test, which is still virtually silent, all while consuming around 190 watts of power. Okay, so let's split this up a little. Performance-wise, it's an RTX 4070, so no matter what, you're going to be satisfied with the feature set and the performance, even if it is going to cost you a little extra for the luxury. For that money, you're getting a powerful and efficient card with ray tracing capabilities and DLSS with frame generation, so it ticks all of the right boxes, even if AMD's latest 7800 XT has blown it out the water in terms of value for money. Now, while I'm expecting this card to be a little more expensive than your average 4070, it does have quite a lot going for it. Not only are you getting a pre-overclock card, but it's also white and has a nifty little trick up its sleeve with the hidden cable and connector, though I think I made it clear that I would have done it slightly differently. But again, I'm no engineer, and I'm sure Inno have done their research into the best way of doing it. And well, this is the end result. Now for me, while it's not, should we say, perfect in my eyes, it's the start of something, much like we've seen in the past from the likes of EVGA on their GPUs, rest in peace, of, finding a way to reroute the cable to give you the very best and cleanest looking system. And I am all for that. I welcome the innovation and ideas and want to see more manufacturers trying new ideas and I guess seeing what sticks, because at least then it gives us more unique looking systems, especially with cases and motherboards literally on the horizon that will ditch cables around the business side of your PC and instead will focus on having the connectors on the rear of the board. And this is where I think INNO3D have I don't know, maybe take an influence and are trying to hit a market that is up and coming. And honestly, I can't fault them for that. Now, design-wise, the white and silver is lovely. It honestly just looks amazing and just works. And I'm glad to see someone doing white GPUs again and doing it properly, because so many have tried and failed with cream-looking PCBs or, I don't know, too much branding. I think Inno have maybe just hit it just right, because while the PCB isn't white, well, you can't actually see it between the fan shroud and the backplate. And that in theory helps to keep costs down, and I'm all about saving so that you can put that money into other parts of your build. And yeah, I think that about wraps this one up. It's been an interesting one. What do you think? Have Inno got something unique here, or does it need a little more refinement? I get that it works for vertically mounted cards, but not so much for horizontal. So yeah, let me know in the comments section below if you agree with me. That aside, hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, then consider supporting us over on Patreon, where you'll get access to a ton of exclusive benefits, including behind the scenes content, bi-weekly game nights, access to our testing data, and much more. You'll also get access to a super special area on our Discord, which, on a side note, definitely look into if you want something cool, friendly, and non-toxic to chat tech and play games. The link for all that great stuff is down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.